podcast. This is episode 36. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about success, whether that's the success of your business, your product, or your service, and the new challenges that can bring um, to you and your business and your journey. Because not only can failure be a little bit scary, but sometimes success can be as well. I guess failure is very scary, but success can be a little scary too, and we can help navigate around that a little bit with some of the things that we're going to talk about here today. So a lot of entrepreneurs may think that when their product or service or company starts seeing the success, making a lot of money, it's going to boost their confidence. They're going to go even further. You'll have relief. Now, while it does boost your confidence, from my experience and the experience I've talked to other people about, it is definitely not relief, because what you find is that as you become more successful, the pressure increases. So you have a little sigh of relief at first. Oh my gosh, this worked. People are paying money for it. That's great. Here comes some cash flow. Here comes some feeling of success. But it quickly increases the pressure on you as an entrepreneur, the pressure on your business. And there's also a lot of pressure financially, typically, because even though you might have cash flow coming in, you're typically going to have a lot of expenses to cover. If the product or service is selling and your company is growing, there's lots of things to pay for. And in business, a lot of the times you have to invest the money up front to be able to grow. Now, we talk a lot about trying to sell before you buy and all those types of things. But at the end of the day, a growing business needs, capital. And so that can also increase the pressure on an entrepreneur that's starting to see some success. So yes, it does give you some type of confidence that things are going well, but it definitely doesn't give you any relief, and it shouldn't give you any relief, because that's when even more work starts. When your product or service starts selling, that is when your decisions matter more. So it can be very mentally stressful when your product or service starts selling, because every decision you make matters a lot more. There's actual money tied to it. Sometimes, as you get bigger, you start to hire people. There's people's families involved in it, because this is how they put food on their table, and you can't, mess that up. You need to make sure everybody gets paid and all that kind of good stuff. So every decision that you make matters more. So while it may seem like you would be relieved when you start making those sales, at the end, it can be a little bit deceiving. Sometimes more sales comes with, an increased risk and an increased pressure and increased stress. Another thing that happens once we start actually selling a product or service, it works, we're great, cash flowing, everything's going great. The fear of losing that momentum is definitely something that happens a lot, of losing what you have going. So, as soon as you start getting something going, especially if you see it maybe slip back a little bit, right? Because not everything is always a straight line. So you see some sales come in, you get excited, and your conversion rate is this, and then your conversion rate starts dropping, a little bit. But in life, that kind of happens, goes up and down, whatever it is. So, it's pretty stressful to keep that momentum going. And if you're not stressing about the momentum, keeping that momentum going, you should be, right? Because it will, die down if you don't actually, attend to it. Like my favorite motivational speaker, Jim Rohn, says, the weeds will eat the garden if you don't tend to it, right? So essentially, at the end of the day, success, meaning a product or service, or even your entire business starting to make revenue, grow, and actually have cash flow, in terms of that success, it replaces one set of problems with another. So yes, we want to focus on our product or service selling. Yes, it's an amazing feeling once it starts doing that. It's a huge turning point. But just keep in mind, that's not time to take your foot off the gas and now you can spend more time doing other things and all of that. That's, when time to put your feet on the pedal all the way, and, make sure that you understand there's not going to be less work, there's going to be more. You're replacing one set of problems of not being able to make sales. Now you're making sales. You replace that with another set of problems. So there's always going to be problems as an entrepreneur. We have to just power through it And that's something we're going to have to learn how to do, whether our products are selling or not, or our products or services, our company, whether we're cash flowing or not. That's, what we have to do. So a set of new fears are also created. So now that there's some cash coming in, we're a little more fearful of losing what we've built. So what happens is that adds to the fact that decisions are harder to make. In my opinion, I know some people are amazing at this. Being decisive is an amazing trait, and some people have a better time with this than others. But I think it gets harder and harder to be as decisive when there's so much on the line and you have so much fear of losing what you've built. Fear of not being able to, repeat the results is also something that can get to you. There is a huge pressure on you to maintain everything that's going forward. So, with more success comes more responsibility, and it's always going to be that way. Um, just keep in mind, failure isn't the only thing to fear. Success has some things to fear as well. We need to maybe prepare for those so that we're ready to keep that momentum going. So let's talk about why early success can actually stall growth. So sometimes, you know, founders self-sabotage, essentially playing it too safe, avoiding experimentation, you know, overprotecting what they worked for, stopping outreach. So these are things where if you start to see some early success, you may not go down these roads of experimenting with different products or services, different ways to market those products or services, different partners to, reach out to, all those types of things. you know they they won't get done if you feel like you're having early success and you just start moving forward. I think those are crucial times in businesses journeys where you need to experiment with a lot of different things, because yes, maybe you're seeing some success with that product or service, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get more improved results. That doesn't mean that there are going to be other things to launch with it. That doesn't mean that you have to be too overprotective of it. So we need to make sure we're still experimenting. We've talked about before how you should probably be spending maybe 90% of your time on what actually makes revenue, and then maybe 10% of time on like launching a new product, having a new idea, doing something like that. So I think that kind of falls into that category of just making sure that you're handling everything that needs to be handled, but still take some time, even if that's going great and successful. That core 90%, time to make sure to continue experimenting with new offerings or new ways to present those offerings, or new ad native. Even I'm guilty of it sometimes. Entrepreneurs, kind of get comfortable with the creative that they have for ads, and they say, hey, I got a great conversion rate going, I don't need to go experiment with more ads. Well, what's great about ads is that you can go experiment with other without necessarily changing your conversion ratio on the ones you already have running. Or also, you could go into the world of trying to maybe have more, content creator partners, things like that. So you never know which one of those avenues is going to blow up for you. So I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, we do get a little comfortable with our ad creative and just our, advertising in general and ways to get to customers, when that's something we always want to be focusing on, even if what we're doing is already successful. We want to keep experimenting and keep pushing forward on those fronts. So, how do we handle growth without panicking? So, boom, new business, new product, new service, we launch it, and things start to go well. Well, we want to treat wins as data, not as a solidity of the company or the product or the service, right? The wins, the conversions, everything should be treated as data so that we can look at it. And we can also, again, spend some time experimenting with other things and getting data from those as well. Because sometimes we may start making some sales with the product or service, and a gold mine is only a small shift away. So yeah, we might have done, pretty well at this and made some money. But if we would have never experimented and found this adjacent thing that this company could do as well, we would have missed out on millions. And that's an actual true story for me. So, we want to keep our mind open there and treat a win as another set of data of that what you did there works. And we want to keep moving forward there and pushing that, improving that, and also keep experimenting with some other things at the same time. Always testing everything, right? We want to test everything that we possibly can. We talk about the MVP, the minimal viable product, to get something out there and start testing it in different ways. And we need to be able to build systems so that we can scale. So I think a big mistake a lot of entrepreneurs make is building their business without thinking about scaling. Especially in the beginning of your business, it's very easy to just manually hack a lot of stuff together. It's very easy to not document what it is that you're doing. But we want to try to go into everything thinking, how could we scale this? Let's set this up in a way where we can scale it up. And so the easiest time you have scaling is when you've taken that time as a entrepreneur, when you're building up the company and the processes to do them in a way, always thinking, how is this going to work when I have 1,000 employees, or when I get 100 orders a day, or whatever the metric is that you're judging scale by. How is this going to work at scale? So we want to try to get ahead of that, and then that will have an effect on less panic when we're successful, because it's already in that scaled flow there of from beginning to end. When you were working on this product or service or building this business, you were thinking about what's it going to look like when it scales, when it works, when I can get it out there and start throwing gasoline on the fire, and start spending $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a day on ads. How is this all going to work? And if you're thinking about that from the beginning, it's going to help immensely. Once that success starts coming and that product or service starts selling, you'll be much more likely to successfully scale it up from there if we've been preparing for that ahead of time. When we do see some success with a product or service, we don't want to be too emotional about it. We want to treat it as data of, yes, this one, that's great. Now, of course, you're going to celebrate the first wins, right? The early time, wow, it's selling. Oh, wow, it's selling even more. Those are amazing times, best feelings, in the business world, right? But we want to make sure that we're trying different things. Make sure that we just take it as a point of data that this worked. Okay, let's go with it. Let's run with it. Let's improve on it. And let's also keep testing other ideas to see if something else works, and let's keep testing adjacent ideas to this of, hey, this works, so let's try to change the creative a little bit more based on the fact that we know that works. So there's all kinds of things we can do, once a product or service starts selling. And the last thing we want to do is sit back and be comfortable with it and not have a fear of it stopping, because trust me, businesses go up and down. If there's one thing I've learned after all this time of being an entrepreneur, businesses go up and down no matter how great of a business they are, no matter how long they've been in business. There's big ups, there's big downs. And so the wins are not going to last. So they have to be treated as data to use and analyze and look at, and try to be unemotional about it, and try to treat it as just another piece of the puzzle that you're constantly analyzing and figure out what's the best way to move forward. So, let's go ahead and we can go ahead and get into some questions here. Question here from Wesley. My business just started picking up, and instead of feeling confident, I feel stressed. Is that normal? Yeah, absolutely. So just because your product or service starts selling doesn't mean that you're super boosted with confidence. It definitely means that you're excited. I'm sure it's going to boost your confidence to some degree. But it's not like a magical wand, right? Now you're stressed about actually fulfilling those orders that people are, purchasing, and figuring out why they purchased it, so you can follow up on that and duplicate it, and then figuring out how to duplicate it in a scalable way, figuring out how to deal with the logistics, and probably hiring staff. I mean, there's a million more problems when a product or service starts selling than when it's not. There's only one problem when it's not, is that there's no money. If a product or service is not selling, the one problem you have is no money. If a product or service is selling, there's a million other problems that open up. So it's not a time where there's a huge sigh of relief and, okay, cool, let's put it on autopilot. It's, oh my gosh, things are starting to sell, and now it's time to really get to work. especially if they're very successful and selling a lot. It's going to take a lot to handle that on your end as a business. If you're extremely successful, the faster you are successful, the more difficult it's going to be to handle that. All right, Danielle, question here from Danielle. Why do early wins make more anxious instead of excited? Yeah, I guess that's kind of the same answer as the last question. So Lucas is asking, how do you not freak out when people start expecting more from you? I'm not really sure how to answer that. How do you not freak out when people start expecting more from you? I think we need to expect more from ourselves, probably. I guess I should say. I don't know who's expecting more of you there specifically, but as we grow and as we become more successful, we should be expecting more of ourselves because we should be a better person than we were when a product or service wasn't selling, right? This is part of our journey and we've learned since then. And then when the product or service starts selling, we're learning even more as soon as it starts selling and a whole lot more along the way. So, you know, yeah, that's what I would say. Avery is asking, I'm scared my recent success was a fluke, so how do I build confidence without getting cocky? Um, I think testing is probably the best way to see if something was a quote unquote fluke or if you should be confident in it. Make sure you have measurable ways to test what you're doing and to track the data, the conversion rates, all that kind of good stuff. And that's going to help you, be more confident that what you did is not a fluke. It's got to be repeatable. You should make sure that the way you're setting it up is scalable at the same time. A lot of factors there. But yeah. Question here from Ronan. How do you keep pushing when things are working instead of playing it safe? So when things are working, I would say that there's even more pressure to keep going. So I would say as long as we expect that as entrepreneurs, it shouldn't be a problem. So when things are working, sometimes we do end up playing it safe. And I've been guilty of this before for sure, where things are going great. You think you can spend more time dedicated to other things, new things, different things. And what can happen is that can kind of slip away from you. You might, start by, you're spending 10% of your time on new products or services or new ventures. And then that might slowly creep into 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, because you think that other product, service, or business is doing well. And you get comfortable thinking it's always going to go well, and it can slowly slip away as you spend more time on other ideas, products, services, businesses, ventures that you're doing. So we definitely, have to be careful of that. Okay, let's see here. Maribel's asking, what's the biggest mistake founders make right after their first real traction? I think just after the first sales, I think very common is for people to just get in the not set up the processes correctly, I guess I should say, to execute it and to also duplicate it and repeat those sales and then scale them up. That's usually the hardest thing, right? That's the difference between people who own small businesses and people who own larger, scalable, more scalable businesses. Essentially, usually the documentation, the training, and the way the company was set up, as this isn't going to be set up for me to just do with paper and pen at my house and only me know how to do this and all this stuff. These are people who set up companies intentionally of, hey, if I do it this way, I could have a system to do it, employees, we could scale it up, and it would work. So I think after you start making your first sales, the first thing you should be thinking is, we need to make more sales. But the second thing you should be thinking is, while we're setting this all up, while we're executing the sales that we already made, while we're trying to make more sales, let's do this in a way where we're confident we can scale it up so that everything is set up to be scaled up from the beginning, and it will drastically decrease the problems you have when you start selling a lot, because selling a lot can bring a lot of problems, especially if you're not prepared. Question from Theo. How do you separate your self-worth from your business once it starts working? That's a great question. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, our self-worth is tied up in our business worth. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not sure. And it could be a up or a down depending on which side of the where your business is at. I think we want to try to separate that because as an entrepreneur, we know that most entrepreneurs have failed multiple times before they became wildly successful. Tons of entrepreneurs who have became wildly successful and then failed and had to climb their way back. I mean, there's so many different stories and journeys of people in entrepreneurship who have failed, right? So we probably shouldn't be tying our self-worth as a person to something that can go up and down so much and that we know goes down. We should know going into this as entrepreneurs that we're going to fail a lot. And so it's probably not a good idea to tie our self-worth up in that. However, I know most of us do because we're, born entrepreneurs. So it's a great question. I don't know if I really have the answer for it, but logically, we shouldn't, attach our self worth to our business worth, really, or our business success in general. But I think it's probably natural and, you know, something that people do regardless. Okay, question from Kendra. When should you slow down and stabilize versus push harder after a win? I don't think you should ever slow down. I think stabilize is a great word. I think we should always stabilize, but I don't necessarily think you should slow down. Now, maybe you need some time to stabilize. So let's say something's working, you're converting, you got a good conversion rate, you're out there advertising it, and you're like, wow, this is growing, it's great. If I put more money in, we make more sales. That's exactly where you want to be at, right? So you can scale it up. If you feel that you need more time to stabilize or to get the processes correctly to execute, actually delivering the product or service, then maybe just not pour as much, gasoline on the fire. Maybe I wouldn't stop, right? I wouldn't decrease. I wouldn't slow down. I would maybe not increase while you're trying to figure out that back end. But I definitely wouldn't slow down and say, okay, something worked. Let's stop taking chances. Let's stop, doing these things. I wouldn't slow down at all. But I would say that if you need help more like on the back end of the processes and to stabilize, I guess, like you had mentioned there, Kendra, I think, you could stop expanding, but I don't think you should slow down. Okay, question here from Soren. How do you avoid letting early success change your habits in a bad way? So how do you avoid having early success changing your habits in a bad way? Just keep in mind that success goes up and down, and also success may just be a little entry to another success that's even bigger. So there's definitely, shouldn't be bringing about bad habits. We should say, okay, we won. That's great. Let's look at why we won. Again, we want to treat it like a data point. We're winning right now. Why are we winning? And, how can we duplicate this and make it even more exponential and scale it? And at the same time, just making sure that we're treating it as something that needs to be looked at from a data standpoint and know that that may increase, it may decrease, it may totally not work anymore ever, right? So, it's something we need to keep in mind there and just try to not let off, right? Once we start selling, that's when the real work begins. A question here from Jillian. We'll take the last question. Question here from Jillian. If someone just had their first, this might actually work moment, what should they focus on next? Yeah, so when something starts selling, a lot of us get that, wow, this is actually going to work moment, right? So I definitely feel you there, Jillian. So great question. So yeah, when you have that moment of that, I like to call it as far as your first sale, I love to call it the miracle, right? When you put a new business product or service out there into the marketplace and the market responds by purchasing it, it's a great feeling of, wow, it's a miracle. And it truly is. Let me tell you, after being involved in so many businesses and also consulting so many other businesses, it is a miracle when people start purchasing your product or service, because there's tons of businesses that don't ever really get that reaction, right? Even businesses that I've owned, right? Businesses that I've invested in have literally never crossed that threshold of really making their first sale on that product or service that we set up. Now, some of them pivoted and made other, sales and did other things, but it is a miracle. You could go a year, 2 years trying to sell a product or service and it never actually clicks. So when it does click, it's an absolute miracle. And so, you know, if you're having that moment, if you're going through that miracle of, wow, somebody bought this, multiple people are buying this could actually work. You know, what you need to focus on next is executing what they've purchased first and foremost to an amazing degree so that they're very satisfied. Ask for referrals from them, all that kind of good stuff, and figure out how to repeat it. And just keep in mind this entire time when you're figuring out how to execute and give the customer what they paid for, try to do it in ways that are scalable. Try to have your mind in that position of, how would this work when an employee was doing it instead of me? How will this work when we're selling 100 a day instead of just one a day? Right? These are things that we should be keeping in mind so that we're building our business in a scalable way from the beginning. So when we have that aha moment of, wow, people are buying this product or service, I created something that people are buying. Obviously, the next thought is, how do we execute it properly, go above and beyond so that we can get reviews from our first customers? And how do we build this in a scalable way so that when we get this system down and we're selling products or services and our customers are happy with those and we've delivered them, if we've set this process in a scalable way, then at that point it's so easy to just start pouring fuel on the fire, and boom, sales will explode. Growth is exponential, as if your business is scalable. So we want to build our business in a scalable way from the start, and we should just always have that in our mind of all the processes we build, how can we make these scalable? And then you just pour fuel on the fire and watch the sales grow. All right, with that being said, we will go ahead and get out of here for today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Founding Without Funding podcast. Remember, if you need to start or grow your business, you can go to foundingwithoutfunding.com and purchase the book, purchase the course, and we can help you not only launch your business, but also grow your business if you have an existing business. So thank you.